Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. With me today is Kamala Nair. Kamala is a meticulous copywriter. She's a brand voice expert, and she's a published novelist with more than 20 years of professional writing experience. Our focus today will be on email messaging surrounding your conversion and nurture campaigns. Listen in as we talk about the importance of storytelling in your messaging. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hello, Kamala. How are you?
Hi, Michelle. I'm doing really well. How are you?
I am great. Now, you're not in the US right now, are you?
I'm not. I am from the US originally, but I've actually lived in England for the last 7 years.
I love that. I've worked with multiple women who have picked up their lives and traveled around Europe and traveled around other places. And, what a blessing to be able to get up and do that. And then we always talk about building a business that allows you to move around and to travel and to work from anywhere. And you've really done that. And so it's kind of sweet to see.
Yeah, actually, moving was the impetus for being able to start my business because I was so afraid of taking that leap and just kind of leaving the security of a job, of the typical 9 to 5 job. And then moving here was just sort of like gave me that permission and that freedom to take the leap finally.
Yeah, just go for it. Well, Kamala, for our listeners, start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your journey that brought you. You currently help with copywriting and all kinds of things. We're going to talk more about that in a second, but I would love for people to know a little bit of your journey, like what gave you the chops to be able to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually stumbled into the world of interior design. It wasn't something that I set out or that I sought. I started out, I've always wanted to be a writer. I've always been drawn to storytelling and wanting to tell stories. So after college, I decided that I wanted to move to New York and get into the magazine world. So I got a job as an editorial assistant at Parenting Magazine, which is really funny in hindsight because I was 22 years old, knew absolutely nothing about parenting, but I was writing these articles about like baby bottles and, the best gear bags. But it was a great intro kind of into that world of magazine editorial. And while I was there, I learned about this opportunity for an editor position at Elle Decor. And I didn't know much about interior design at the time, but I loved the magazine. I was really entranced by kind of the glamour of that world. And so I applied and I went through the whole process and I ended up getting that job. And that was really my first step into that world of interior design. And I really fell in love with it. I fell in love with not only, the beauty and the glamour of the interiors, but also just learning the stories behind these interiors and learning to kind of tease out the stories and tell those stories and kind of understand the human side of what's behind those beautiful pictures. So I worked at Elle Decor as an editor for 4 years. And then I had this sort of instinctive desire to learn more about the marketing side of things. I had gotten this really strong background in editorial, but I really wanted to understand the marketing side. So I moved into a role as a copywriter at West Elm, the home and furnishings brand. And while I was there, my main job was writing the catalog copy. So it was almost like a magazine. I would basically write the magazine, or sorry, the catalog copy from cover to cover. And I also got kind of a front row seat to email marketing while I was working there. And email was probably the biggest driver of sales. And the copywriters who worked on email were just like in this dynamic world, and they were so involved in it. And I was really impressed by that. And in my next role, I took a sort of brief detour out of the world of design, and I got a job as a head of copy at Blue Apron, the meal delivery service.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, the company was not public. They were very much a startup. And I got, again, that exposure to email marketing. And in my role as the head of copy, that was my job, to kind of write those emails, to make sure that our open rates were up, that our click-through rates were up. And so I really got that immersion into the world of email marketing. But I really missed interior design. I really missed writing about design, and stepping away from it is what made me realize that that was kind of where my passion lay. So that was the point where I left New York and I moved to London, and I decided to take the leap and do my own thing. So I spent a few years freelancing, and I was doing a lot of work for home and design brands. I freelanced for Casper, Brooklinen, various home furnishings brands. I also did a lot of design journalism during that time. I wrote a lot of articles for Lux, which I still do. I wrote web features for Architectural Digest and First Dibs Introspective magazine. So I really got immersed in that world. And in 2022, I decided, okay, I need to just put a stake in the sand and just fully own this. And that was when I decided to launch my copywriting business, which is exclusively for interior designers.
I never, I don't know why, but I never really gave thought to the people that sit and write for some of these magazines. Like, and I'm talking about like West Elm. Like, I get it. I mean, I produced and helped put out a magazine for 4 years, every other month. So I understand, the language and the writing. And I finally was able to give away all of my books on like the AP method, all the different methods for how you have to write all these things. But I never really thought about, I guess, sitting down as a writer and writing a description of a chair, or writing and making it different from that chair. I mean, really being able to differentiate between 14 chairs in one magazine is a big deal. And having people see themselves in their lives and what they do by what they read on the paper, not just what they see, right? Not just the visual aspect. That's intriguing to me. I find that fascinating to even consider now. I would almost want to go back and look at some of those just to look at the copy. I don't know that I ever really thought about the copy. It clearly didn't deter me from things, but I don't know that I thought about it. So that's such a cool way to kind of get into it and to see what the difference is between some of these items. Because if you can differentiate, I think verbally, between 4 chairs on the page, then you are able to work with 4 different types of designers and differentiate their work from each other. If you were, supporting multiple people, it's that the differentiation. And I know that you and I have talked before. You've done some work in my private coaching group and shared there, really teasing out those differences. Like, what is it that makes yours? I mean, I think that's the hallmark of somebody who does really great copy, really great branding, really great website work. It's not the cookie cutter. It's not the cut and paste. I mean, for me, I think that's what makes me a great coach. I don't have just one answer for everybody. There may be certain principles that we follow. There may be certain guidelines that we put into place, but there is true nuance for every single person, every single design, every single chair. There is something different. And to be able to articulate that in a way that resonates with the reader of the copy is really a gift. I know I laugh sometimes, the team that I work with and that has been supporting me for years, I always say to them, I mean, I'm not great with that part. I just think, my gosh, I'm great at what I do. Why don't people work with me like that? You know what I mean? Hey, I've told you I'm great at it. Just come on, trust me. Come on over here and let me help you. Like, let's don't get bogged down in all the words. But the truth of the matter is, people need the words. They need to sit with the words. They need to chew on the words. They need to absorb them and digest them before they make a move. And I think quite often, in all aspects, if we're so focused on the doing, we're not focused on the sharing and the words and how the words matter. And that's why I have to get help for that, because for me, I'm ready to just get down to, let me just show you how to do it. Can I, please don't tie my hands to talk about it. Let me just show you. I mean, I'm like chomping at the bit. I must have to slow myself down. Like, it's not unheard of to go, slow your roll, Michelle, slow your roll, because I'm like ready to get to the juicy stuff. But that stuff matters. The words around and surrounding the offer that any of us would make matter. It's almost like bringing them into it. I'm a fan of Southern Lit, especially.
I am too.
I've got one of my best friends. Her mom, no, her sister is an author of Southern Lit, and like Pat Conroy, just some of those kinds of things. You read it. Patty Callahan Henry, if anybody wants to read her stuff, really great. But as you listen to it, it's this lilting, like it draws you in to the story. You understand the characters, you understand where they are, and she's written Savannah and the Low Country of South Carolina, and you can see that the draping moss, and you can hear the frogs, and like it literally puts you in the world with words. To find somebody who can do that level of storytelling, I think is a true gift. And then to pick up that gift and use it for our businesses is equally as important.
I completely agree. And like you, before I got into this whole world, I never thought about things like the story behind a chair and what makes one chair different from the other. But it's really fascinating when you actually do get into it. When I worked at West Elm, we would do these huge walkthroughs through the warehouse with the sourcing team. And they would tell us the stories about each item that was going to be in that next season. And that was when I really started realizing the power of story on place and on, just pieces of furniture, and how words could really elevate those pieces from something that's so much more than just something to sit on. It really becomes, it really is what adds character to a space, the stories behind these pieces.
I'll have to go back and look, but one of my early interviews, oh gosh, maybe in 2019, I think it was. It was either late 18 or early 19. I'll add it to it. But I interviewed her, a woman, I'm pretty sure her name was Michelle, and she went around and helped people document the art in their home, and then put together like a coffee table book describing the art, where they got the art, what the art meant to them, pretty much writing not only the story of where the art came from, but the story for their family around that art. And we've been in the process of renovating our home. We've redone the kitchen, we've redone the family room. We're like going room to room, and we were painting the foyer the other day. And I have a watercolor that was done on, one of the sign numbered prints, the whole thing, when we were in Bermuda. And I bought it years ago, before children. But that picture tells a different story. I had won the President's Club at work. It was like 1993. I was newly married. They rented a private jet and took us all over there. Like there's a whole story that picture represents for me. Somebody else, they would look at it and they're like, oh, that looks like a boat scene in the marina in Bermuda, because oh yeah, that is. But here's what it means to me. This is like,
Totally.
I don't have anything else from that trip. Like I don't have
Mhm.
much else. I've got a little bottle of pink sand because of
Mhm.
the coral. But I can tell you the story from 20 something, 30 something years ago from that picture.
Mhm.
And I think it's the same way, like you're saying with the chair. All I can think of, Kamala, is if I had been invited on those tours where the sourcing team was telling me, I would be thinking, have your coffee and make sure you're listening and paying attention, because that's not like a tour you want to sleep on. If you want to be able to
Right.
their words to express and explain about what's coming later.
Yeah,
They're
I would just be
like
like
hyped. So those
shuffling around with my notebook, like frantically writing notes
getting
down.
notes on the phone, like, like a little live wire trying to get that information out of
Totally.
it. That's so cool. Let me ask you this. When you decided to kind of, like you said, put a stake in the sand and go like, all right, I'm going to go for this on my own. I've done it for others. Clearly, I can do it.
Mhm.
How was it starting the business on your own? Were you afraid, or were you, I mean, we all have a little bit of probably anxiety and fear, but we have such excitement at the same time. That Tell me about that for you. How did that feel to kind of, not only am I moving away from New York, kind of the epicenter for some of these things, for the work that you've done, but I'm going to move into a different country and I'm going to start my own thing and put myself out there. And some of the people that I'm going to be working with are, as they would say, across the pond. How did
Mhm.
push through and
Yeah,
go?
that's a great question, Michelle. It was kind of a mix of emotions. Like you said, there was that fear, there was that anxiety, but there was also, I think, what made me able to push through those feelings was that sense of excitement and also just this sense of deep purpose. I don't think you can start a business unless you are passionate about what you're setting out to do. And I felt really passionate about combining that expertise that I had gained in writing stories about design and pulling out those stories, and then also combining it with the expertise that I had developed in marketing. And I felt like I had sort of been uniquely positioned to create this business, and I felt a strong sense of purpose around it. So that's really what kind of helped me make that push, as well as just the change in environment. I feel like when you're in your same routines and surrounded by the same people and the same sites, it's really easy to just keep going and just keep taking that, biweekly paycheck and going into the office every day. I think moving and coming to this different location just kind of gave me that courage to take that step and do this.
Because things were new, so you might as well give it a try, right?
Exactly.
I'm curious, do you think in words?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I narrate things almost because I'm also a novelist. And so I'm always kind of moving through the world, almost narrating things in my head the way I would if I were a character in a novel.
I love that. So it's funny. I was having a conversation with my husband, and my sons are dyslexic. So they think in pictures. So when we
Mm,
talk about, they think in pictures, you think in words. I'm a weirdo, but I think in analogies. I'm
mm,
constantly comparing things. So where you're narrating, I am doing, oh, this is like this. Oh, I'm like, dots are connecting in my brain. And the second way that I think when I think in words is I type them out on a typewriter in my brain. Because I had to take typewriting in high school and we couldn't look at any of the keys. We had to look up and we had to type. So if I'm trying to remember how to spell a word, in my brain, think I see a QWERTY keyboard and I can tell you how to spell it because of how I'm typing it. Like I
mm.
know that was just
That's so
that was a
interesting.
tidbit for everybody to understand how crazy my brain works. But it's
But
very
I think even
analytical.
yeah, totally. And I think even with the different ways that we think, whether it's through pictures or analogies or words, the one unifying element is that we all think through story. And
True.
it's like humans are wired for story. It's
We
how we make sense of the world. So however that's showing up in your head, it's all about story and processing stories.
Well, and all the way back before we really had written language, traditions and stories and that's how everything was passed down. It was a verbal culture. Everything was talked about and shared about. And we see pictures of children sitting around their parents and the parents telling them this is what happened. You see pictures in the Bible of different conversations, and it's all storytelling. Anywhere you look, a book, like everywhere. It was, hear about Aristotle sitting around and teaching people. It was just story, story, story all the way through. All right, so we're going to talk about the importance of storytelling in our newsletters. And so
Yes.
I'm curious if we could just, I'm assuming everybody knows what newsletters are, or I'm going to even call it more broadly email communications. I think sometimes
Mhm.
we use newsletter and we think it should be something different than storytelling or conversation. Give us your definition of what you think the most current, I'm not going to say acceptable, the most accepted marketing tool of newsletters. What does that encompass today?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because I do call it an email newsletter because that's what everyone understands and for clarity's sake. But I actually really hate the term newsletter because people take it so literally and they actually send newsletters and they're really boring. Nobody wants to hear just like bullet points about your news. They don't want to hear, here's my latest project, here's my latest hire, here's the latest award I won. And I subscribe to so many interior design newsletters, and so many of them are doing that. So the way that we elevate newsletter, and I'm still trying to come up with a term that actually encapsulates what it is and what it should be. But the way that we elevate that is still sharing those things. You obviously still want to be sharing about your latest project. You want to share about, these experiences you're having, but it's about sharing it through the lens of story and using story to elevate that information so that it is actually interesting and engaging and valuable to your reader.
I think that's also why the story brand method is so important, like, or that people use that so much on a website, because it's
Mhm,
about everything we're doing. I'm pulling you into my world, and I'm pulling you
mhm.
into my world so that you are invested in it enough to care about what's not only what's happening, but what's coming, and then my place in it, right? How do I get involved in
Exactly.
your story? How do you get involved in my story? So
Yes.
let me ask you this. What are the most basic parts, or what are the must-haves in a newsletter?
Yeah, well, before you can even get to the newsletter, you have to have the opt-in, which is
Good
a
point.
piece of, exactly, it's like a piece of valuable content. Some people call it a lead magnet or a freebie that you share for free in exchange for someone's email address. So that's the first piece. You have to have a great website and you have to have the opt-in that really pulls your ideal client in so that you can capture their email address. And then the next step is actually sending out those emails. And I would say the most important elements are number one, that you send emails regularly. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see is people sending emails really irregularly. And then it just, readers really thrive on consistency. They thrive on knowing, okay, next week I'm going to get this email from Michelle, or in 2 weeks I'm going to get this email from Michelle. And if they start getting emails, 1 month here and then there's a 3 month gap, you just lose that connection. So the first element is that regular, that consistent sending of emails. The second piece is I like to think of emails as kind of an educational arc where you're taking that reader through this arc about you. So they're learning about you, they're learning about your personality, they're learning about your story, and they're learning about your work in a way that's really engaging and also providing value to them. So in a conversion email sequence, which is an email sequence that triggers after that person has signed up for your opt-in and received your opt-in, the the goal for the conversion email sequence then is to bring that person through that arc, to sort of lead them through that buyer's journey and the 3 stages of the buyer's journey. So the first step is awareness, the second step is consideration, and the third step is decision. So you want to kind of lead them through those 3 stages so that by the end by the time they're actually ready to get started with a project, they know that you're the right person for them. They know everything about you. By the time they book that call, it's a no-brainer. The call is just a formality. They're ready to hire you. So that's the second piece. And then finally, I would just go back to what we were saying a little bit earlier, which is it's about story. It's about connecting everything that you're talking about to a story. So you really want to, one element that needs to be in your emails is vulnerability. And I think that's one thing that I see missing a lot. You really want to show your raw self. I'm not saying you have to expose everything or,
Sure.
do TMI, but you want to be human. You want to show that there's a human side to your brand. So, and you don't want to just info dump stuff about yourself. You want to connect it to something that connects to your ideal client's life. So just to give you an example, let's say you're a designer with a focus on sustainability. Maybe your story, maybe your origin story is about what brought you to sustainability, what sparked your interest, what made that the path that you had to follow. And then you can connect it to something in your client's life. Like maybe it's sharing tips on how they can incorporate more sustainable elements into their home. So it's not just sharing your origin story, it's sharing it in a way that really connects to your brand and also connects to your client.
So there are different, you kind of talked about a couple of different types of emails that can be sent, right? When we're looking at that. So we have, I'm just going to break apart a couple of ideas here and then certainly expound upon it. But I think we have what I'm going to call our monthly consistent email communication that we would consider like a newsletter. It's not a follow-up sequence to anything. It's not a
Mhm.
landing page, sequence to try to sell. It's just that general, I am coming into your inbox every week, every other week, once a month, whatever it is, consistently. And you can trust that I'm going to be there with something,
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's one type of email.
That's called a nurture email.
That's right. So the nurture sequence that we have, we're
Mhm.
nurturing these people. We're letting them know we're still in business. We're like hanging out. I think that's what most people would consider their newsletter is that nurture
Yes.
sequence. Okay.
Mhm.
Then we have the emails that go out after a lead magnet of some type or some type of educational content or something that they have gotten from us for free, the freebie, whatever we want to call that. They've gotten that
Exactly.
off of our website or through a webinar or through some space that we've delivered it. And then we have a follow-up sequence of 3, 5, 10 emails, whatever it might be, to follow up and to draw them into our world because they have expressed interest in this particular piece of information that we gave for free. And so
Exactly.
that might be just even a little bit different, right? Let's just call it that, oh gosh, what do you call it? It's your, what's the sequence that we usually
Your
call
conversion
it? Conversion
sequence.
sequence. The conversion sequence could very well be different for each lead magnet and usually is a little bit different for each lead magnet
Yes.
because based on the lead magnet that different people choose, there could be a different funnel, a different path, a different way that they might want to engage with our work or a different product that they're going after or whatever. So I don't want
Absolutely.
to overwhelm anybody, but just saying we have different types of emails for different um, hopeful for outcomes. Like there are outcomes that we're expecting, and we have different email sequences to drive it. So it's almost thinking about it's no different than we have communication with the client. If I'm going in to verbally communicate with the client that I want to sell you this pillow, that's going to be a
Mhm.
very different conversation than the one that says, I want to redo your entire home. And so
Exactly.
being aware that really what we're doing in these email communications is it's a touch point. We're just touching them, touching them, touching them, so that they can start to figure out, do I like her? Do I know her? Do I trust her? Because if I like her, I know her, I trust her, I can get through the awareness, the consideration, and the decision, right? If I don't know, like,
Yes.
trust you, my decision making is going to be a different outcome than if I do know, like, and trust you. That's where I think the vulnerability comes in. And I love that you mentioned having it and how to connect it, because I know I have seen some that were so stilted you didn't even know who was behind the email,
Mhm.
and that they're so formulaic and they are so corporate almost. And I can appreciate that from a true corporate email, but some,
Mhm.
and then some are almost, in my opinion, too familiar,
Mhm.
you know? Yo, yo, bruh. I'm like, that sounds great, but I don't have people in my normal life who speak to me like that.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that's not what's happening. I mean, my kids might do it as a joke sometimes, but it's not like
Mhm.
my day to day is not surrounded by people talking to me like that. So when somebody comes into my email speaking to me like that, I'm like, you clearly don't know me. This email's
Right.
written for me. You've written this in a tone and in a way that makes me think you're 14 years old, right? I'm not looking at it thinking that this is written for me. And so I think it is important, the language that we use, to be familiar or to create the vulnerability. We really are, it goes all the way back. We're talking to our ideal people about
Mhm.
our ideal work, using our mission, vision, and values, and showing up authentically as who we are and how we would speak. We don't need to put on airs in our email. I know that sounds crazy to even say, but some of the emails that I read when I meet the people, the emails doesn't even feel like it's them. And this really needs to be a representation, because people are actually buying the opportunity to work with us before they
Yes.
the opportunity for the product that we put into their home.
Yes, and that is such an important point. It's absolutely essential, not only that you're speaking to your ideal client and you're speaking to their pain points, their desires, their interests, but also, as you said, Michelle, that you're being 100% yourself, that you're being authentic. And if someone doesn't like that, then that's good, because then you've filtered out that person who wouldn't have been the right client for you. So if you're putting yourself out there authentically, if you're speaking like yourself, if your brand voice is true to who you are, then you're going to attract the people that it makes sense for you to work with. And it's the same for your website. If you're yourself on your website, if you use words that sound like you, if you inflect your own personality into your copy, then you're naturally going to attract like-minded people.
It's so funny. I like to say they self-edit. So I didn't do it to them. They chose it for themselves. Because truly,
Yeah.
I mean, I read some website copy sometime. I read newsletter copy. We all do, right? And when I see it and I look at it, I just think these are not that I don't know, it just feels so foreign to me sometimes that I don't see myself engaging further, because or sometimes I literally have to block it and go, that's just marketing, but I love the product. That's just
Mhm.
marketing, but I love the product. And I think as designers, because we are, and in the home industry at large, right? Window treatment, whatever it is, architects, builders, those that are listening, we're going to be in their home. We're going to be in their sacred spaces of family. And so we really want to try to speak in a way that our ideal client says, I don't mind having you in my home. I don't mind you being here. The things you're talking about as important are the same things that matter to me. Oh, wow, you've had that experience. I had a similar experience. I think about things like, even with just product choice, I have asthma, I have allergies, I have autoimmune issues. And so when I'm choosing elements in my home, I'm thinking, off gassing. I'm thinking, am I going to be able to stay in that home? Do I need to go get a hotel room for days? Like, what
Mhm.
are the things that are going to matter for my health and for other
Mhm.
people's health? And because I have allergies and asthma and all my stuff, I'm constantly asking other people, is there something I need to be aware of? Because it's in my mind to think about, because I have to think about it for myself. And so even just drawing those correlations makes them think, okay, you've had people in your family, or you've done this for other people, or you've had this experience yourself. You're going to take my experience that I'm going to share with you, with regard to something similar. And I believe that you're going to be able to hold space for that. And so it's just making ourselves open. I know Brene Brown does a lot of conversation about vulnerability, and
Hmm.
it's so needed, but it's so hard. And I think that
Yes.
we also have to be careful when we're vulnerable to the TMI conversation. We have to be
Hmm.
vulnerable with people that we can trust to hold that.
Yes.
So if you don't feel like you can trust your 5,000 on your email list with something,
Mhm.
don't put it in there. I mean, you
Yes.
got to
Yeah.
say once you put it out there, it is out there. Like I feel like I can trust people with the fact that I'm a type 1 diabetic, or
Mhm.
it is what it is. I can't hide it. I walk around with my pump showing half the time. So I don't mind
Mhm.
putting it out there, but not everybody wants to put something out there like that, right? They would want to keep
Totally.
that more quiet.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you have to share everything. It's just about being like you said, it just comes down to being authentic and being willing to show that vulnerable side of yourself and not putting up walls, not putting up a facade, just being yourself.
So what are some
And
good types of, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, finish
oh,
that.
I was just going to say back to your point about, you're in their home. I think that's what makes email so special for this industry, especially because it is a really intimate service in a way. Like it's so intimate, and you really need someone, I think even more, obviously you want to find a designer who you love their style and you love their work. That's, a non-negotiable, but you also want someone who you feel is going to understand you and who's going to hear you and listen to you. And email is a much more intimate and direct form of communication than something like social media. I think social media is great, but it just serves a very different purpose. Email is that direct connection with an audience of people who have chosen to hear from you. They've chosen to get this weekly or bi-weekly or monthly email from you. And so, yeah, I think it just enables you to create that more direct and intimate connection that is going to come when you actually start working together.
So back to the cadence of, let's call it the nurture series. Okay, let's talk about
Yes.
that one for a minute. Um, we know that it needs to be consistent, but is there a magic spot once a month, twice a month, every week?
Yes. So so I'll just start with the conversion sequence because I recommend that everyone start with that and then move into the nurture. So for the conversion sequence, you really want to capitalize on the first 90 days after that subscriber has opted in. So for the first 90 days or the first 3 months, I recommend that you send one email a week. So around 12 emails. After that, I recommend that you space it out a little bit more, and you can space it out to anywhere from 2 weeks to a month, once a month. I prefer the 2 week cadence because I think it gives them just enough space, but it also just keeps you top of mind. And as long as your emails are, engaging and shareable and useful, you want people to get to that point where they're looking forward to receiving your email. And so I think that 2 week number is kind of a sweet spot. I would say the once a month for the nurture is the bare minimum.
Okay. Um, so what are some of the content? Or let's do this. Talk to me about that conversion journey. Let's start there, since that's because normally what we don't want to do, and I think I'm reading into this, but I think it's what you were also kind of saying. We really don't want to put them into this 3-month conversion journey where we're reaching out to them once a week and then put another newsletter on top of that. That's too much information. So then more of the nurture newsletter comes after the conversion sequence has been completed, so that we're not overwhelming.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So you're not sending multiple, you're sending just the
The
conversion
one.
emails once a week, and then it shifts into the nurture sequence.
Okay.
And there's not this huge distinction between, it's not like suddenly you're going to shift into a totally different voice and format. It should be very fluid. It's more that the conversion series is going to be focused more on that buyer's journey. So it's going to be addressing, what are those pain points? What are those frequently asked questions that you're getting from your ideal clients? What questions do they have at each stage of that journey that I, as the interior designer, can help answer in a way that's engaging. And
That's
then
what I
once
was getting ready to exactly ask you, is what are some of the content features of the conversion series? And so that's it. FAQs, what
exactly.
can you expect? How to choose a designer, perhaps budget, like anything that you need to share with them so that they can make a decision.
Exactly. You want to make it crystal clear how they can work with you so they're not getting on that call with you, or even actually, if you can get them to book that call with you, you've done your job. But you don't want them to hesitate to book a call because they're like, oh, I just don't know, what my budget is. I don't know what their budget is. Or you don't want them to not book that call because they're like, oh, I can only book that call once I'm absolutely ready to get started. Like you want to just make sure those questions are answered through that conversion series and guide them through. So at the beginning, in that awareness stage, it's about, helping them figure out what their problem is. And, then it's consideration. It's like, okay, does this person potentially have the tools to help me solve this problem? And then in the third stage, it's like, okay, what do I need to know to actually book that call?
So good. And I think you bring up a good point when you're talking about the first 90 days. For some of us, that might feel like a long time, right? So some people, though, when they're ready, maybe they've been following you in other ways, on Instagram, on Pinterest, on your website. So they may get a quick turnaround to that call. The minute they download something, I'm going to go call right now, boom. But it wouldn't be unheard of for it to be a client that goes through that 3 month nurturing towards conversion, if you will, because they're all nurture sequence. It's all nurturing. It's all trying to give them information to make an informed decision. We're just
Absolutely.
driving the decision a little bit differently, um, based on the timing of where they are in our sales funnel.
Yeah. And when people land on your website, I would say 80% of the time, they're just shopping around. They're not ready. They're not necessarily ready in that instant to hit book a call and start working with you. If they are, that's amazing. That's wonderful. But if they're not, you don't want to lose that person. And if you don't have that opt-in to capture them or to capture their email address, then you most likely are going to lose that person. Because even if they absolutely love your work, in our society where we're constantly inundated with marketing messages, it's more likely that they're going to forget about you. They might bookmark you and then forget about you, or they'll click away and they'll forget about you, or they'll see some other designer's beautiful work on Instagram. And you don't want to lose that person because that's someone that actually did love your work. Your message did resonate with them. And the only reason they might not work with you is because they're not ready in that moment. So those are the people that you want to capture and then nurture through this arc. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, a 90-day, okay, like on day 90, they're going to hit book a call. Because as you said, they might be ready at different stages of the journey. So what you want to be doing is offering or inviting them to book a call with you throughout that journey, or whatever that first step is that you want them to take. You want to be giving them those opportunities. And that's one thing that I see missing a lot from interior design email series, which is that there aren't enough calls to action. And I think creatives sort of shy away from doing that because they're afraid of seeming salesy. But the biggest reason why people don't take action is because there aren't calls to action.
I
So
would
you want
say it's because they don't even know what to do next. Right?
exactly,
It's like we
exactly.
lead them down the path sometimes, and I've been guilty of this. And especially in my first days, I lead them down the path of giving them information, and I thought to myself back in the day, well, I told them what they needed. If they need that, they're going to call me. But they didn't know to call me. They didn't know to fill out a discovery form. They didn't know that I would be willing to just have a conversation with them to see if it was the right timing and the readiness versus I have to commit or not commit, right? They didn't even know there was
Exactly.
the next step and what we wanted them to do. I know that even talking like in story brand for the website, right? Same kind of thing. If they hit your website, you've got to lead them on a path of what is the next thing to do. Because if they don't know where to go and what to do next, they're going to click away and not know what to do. Like they don't know that I can get this free download. They don't know that I can sign up to have a 15-minute conversation to answer questions. They don't know any of these things. And so, yeah, we want people to self-edit, but if we want people to edit in, we've got to show
Mhm.
them how to edit in and where to go next so that it
Yes,
doesn't feel
I
like
love
they're
that.
imposing. I know I used to push back and I would say, just put one CTA at the bottom. If they scroll that far, they'll get it. And they're like, Michelle, some people are like excited at this point and they want to do it. They don't even care about the bottom. You've got to give them an opportunity. But in my brain, I didn't want to be like the Ginsu knives person. Buy now, buy one more, buy one more. Like that, all of that hype makes me feel sick to my stomach. I feel ill when I think about it. So to put it out there for somebody else. However, there's a happy medium between no CTA and beating them over the head with a CTA and Ginsu knife thing. There's something in the middle. And I think
Yes.
each of us has to find where that middle ground is for us and for our readers.
Yes, and I think it's that storytelling and it's that vulnerability and it's that high value content that you're sharing that makes it not salesy because you're inviting them into this experience. You're sharing with them and then you're inviting them. And I think that's what makes the difference. That's why I know a lot of designers like to use templates, and I think that that makes sense, you know, when you're starting out and you just don't have the resources or you don't have the time. But that's why I sort of shy away from templates because I think it's that deep personalization and knowing that someone like poured themselves into this story and into this email that makes it feel not like this sleazy exchange, but like this just kind of, yeah, I guess just that invitation and or
Yeah.
can I say that again?
Yeah, just it's a very personal thing, right? It doesn't feel like I'm just trying to get another person. It feels like you
Yes,
really are engaged and you care about them.
yes.
Know
It
exactly.
feels like this person has invested in me, they've trusted me, and now I'm going to invest in and trust them.
That's right. That's right. Because the trust factor goes both ways. The no like trust goes both ways. I think sometimes we think that all the power is in the hands of the person reaching out, but we have that same power. If I don't know
Yes.
you and I don't like you and I don't trust you, I'm not going to engage with you. And so this is the first part for that. Um, so let me ask this as we wrap up. What are some of the biggest mistakes with email newsletters outside of consistency?
Yeah, so number 1 would be being boring. And I think
Don't be
how do you
boring. That's the title. Don't be boring
yeah.
in your email newsletters.
And I know that I'm going to try to make that specific because I know that's very subjective, but I keep coming back to this. It really comes down to story. What is the story that you can connect to this point that you're trying to make? So rather than just saying, hey, this is our latest project, here are some pictures, it was great, my clients were really happy, turn it into a story. Like maybe your expertise is in mixing vintage items, vintage and antiques into a modern space. So make it into a story about how, or into a tip article about how you can do that and use your portfolio images to illustrate these tips that you're giving. Like give it a frame that makes it engaging and interesting rather than just info dumping on people.
I
So
love
I
that.
would
Give it a
say,
frame. Say that again. Give it a frame. What did you say?
give it a frame that makes it interesting and engaging to people so that you're not just dumping info and saying, here's my work, look at it, admire it. Make it interesting, make it engaging. And the way that you do that is crafting a story around it.
It's really like giving them a lens to say, here's how you should be looking at that. This is what you want, might want to consider versus here's my body of work. Choose.
Yes. And
Guys,
then the other big mistake that I would say is being too, when you are doing these educational type of emails, like tips, being too kind of broad and generic about it. So for example, if you're that specialist in vintage and antiques, you want that to be your thing. Or let's say you're a specialist in mid-century design. Instead of sending out emails about like, here's how to decorate your holiday table, or here's how to hang a gallery wall, show your preeminence in the field. Like, do an email about the history of mid-century modern design in 2 minutes, or do a video, or do something that's like showcasing this specialty that you have and doing it in a way that's engaging and fun, but use that as an opportunity to show off your brand and what makes your brand special. And that's what's going to make you stand out.
Awesome. So tell everybody, because I'm sure that there are people listening that think this sounds great. This sounds amazing, but I can't write that story. I don't know how to, I don't know how to tell the story. I could verbally tell you the story and then you could make it beautiful for somebody else. How do they get in touch with you? Where are you hanging out, Kamala?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram or on LinkedIn, and my handle is just Kamala Nair, KAMALANAIR. And you can also contact me through my website. It's www.kamalanairinc, that's inc.com. And you can just book a call with me directly through that link.
There's your CTA. You can book a call, right?
Exactly.
Perfect then. I'll have all that in our show notes as well. And I
Awesome.
am just appreciative of the conversation around storytelling in our emails. You know, we've heard it so much about storytelling on the website, but really getting into those emails and making them real and vulnerable and story-like and engaging so that our people want to read and want to be part of it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kamala, for highlighting the importance of storytelling in our work. And so now it's time for me to tell you a little bit of my story. Because why not, right? Let's be vulnerable. When I started my company in 2000, I didn't know how to price my work. I didn't know how to plan for profitability, and I didn't know how to manage money in a way that was sustainable. I really struggled. I owed taxes on money that I'd already spent, and I felt a lot of shame at what I was going through. I didn't talk about it to many people, but I kept asking a lot of questions about pricing and profits and money, and was finding that most couldn't answer me. A long time ago, 20-something years. We didn't have the internet the same way we do now, and information wasn't as readily available. And I felt very lonely. Once I sat down and got the basics figured out, though, I was able to move forward. But then I kept running into other obstacles. Things like, how do I plan for the future? How do I not only cover the bills and pay for what needs to be done, but how do I plan for the future? I needed to make more than just enough. I had retirement that I wanted to save for. I had college expenses coming up for my kids. We had weddings that we knew were in our future. And so I needed my business to grow with me. And then I needed to know how much money I could actually take out of the business and let the business still be safe, but me have money to spend. And so being able to work out all those money management, you know, it's not enough to make it. You got to make it and then manage it well. That's what I'm here to do for you. My goal is to fast track it for you so that you don't spend 24 years running into the same obstacles that I've run into, hitting those same holes, owing taxes on money that you don't have the money to pay the taxes on. Like, that's not the life that I would want for you, because I didn't even want it for me. And I figured out how to do it. The challenge is that finances are in every aspect of your business. Every single one, every decision you make, every hire you make, every person you let go, every client you take on, every process you build, financials are a piece of that. And so when it's an area of a company that we don't look at or don't fully understand, it is going to lead us perhaps down a road of not making the best use of the money that we have. If any of this sounds like you, from startup to I'm ready to sell it, I can help you in any part of that journey. So you can find out more about working with me by going to scarletthreadconsulting.com. There's work with me information out there. There's freebies, landing pages, all more information than you probably can take in at one point in time. But I would invite you to jump in and connect with me in some way and let me help you, because I want you to plan to be profitable, because profit doesn't happen by accident.
Profit is a Choice is proud to be part of the designnetwork.org, where you can discover more design media reaching creative listeners. Thanks for listening, and stay creative and business minded.